He wrote one with a slightly uncatchy title of Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World. And it's sort of a sci-fi, dreamlike, magical realism story that deals with the sort of subconscious, the end of the world, death and dying. And it's a really, really great novel. So if someone's listening to this and wants something just really fun to read, I mean, I know I maybe didn't make it sound that fun just now, but actually...
Well, when you first started talking about it, I thought you were telling us that you'd had too much morphine.
Oh yes, yeah, it could be. Yeah, it's very possible. Yeah.
Right. Well,
I'll try that one out before the next one. That's a challenge. I'll try that. That sounds right up my street.
It's not in English either, Paul.
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much, Mark. So we will accept both of those books. Why not? Into the
fantastic.
Oral Apothecary Library.
And I think, as Mark has shared his story with the Oral Apothecary, watch those numbers bounce. I know it was several years ago, the life-changing letter. But yeah, let's see what we can do on social media with it again. Okay, our micro discussion next. And so informed by the recent Drug and Therapeutic Bulletin by Barry Tubrage, Stephen Morris and Michael Wilcock, how do your patients use their medicines at home and why is it important to know? And so it's an editorial piece in the DTB. It's talking about a subject actually that we don't really talk about that often. I used to do a thing in some of the workshops. I'd ask prescribers, good prescribing today. How do you know? What outcomes are we working on in primary care? And we'd eventually get on to, well, the patient doesn't come back because once they've left us, we have no idea what they do with their medicines. This article's a bit narrower than that, but who's going to kick it off for me and jump in with a view?
Yeah, so I think as a clinician, and I'm sure Mark could tell us a few stories here, but you have no idea what goes on behind closed doors. And so the point of this piece, I think, is very well founded. They always say, don't they, the most expensive medicine is the one that never got taken. And so you absolutely have no idea. And I was racking my brains when I read it. And I remember, the best one I can remember personally is a lady who kept coming into hospital, this is in the 90s, with angina. And when we discovered what had happened, you only needed to look at the lady to see the swan neck deformity of her fingers to work out she couldn't use the GTN spray. So just by giving her sublingual tablets that she could then put on her finger and put under her tongue meant that she didn't come back in with angina. So this point of this article is absolutely spot on. And there are plenty of teams that have pharmacy technicians, for example, who go in and try to do a medicines management assessment in people's homes. But I agree with what the guys have said in the article. It is very often not thought about, and people don't have enough time almost to think about it, but they probably do need to.
Mark, what weird things have you seen regarding people's use of medicines, especially in the last year of life? And
the sort of typical one is if you do a community visit, or even if you're in the hospital doing ward rounds. And when it comes to laxatives, I mean, who likes taking laxatives? No one likes taking laxatives. And what I've always found is you can actually, by the amount of grapes next to someone's bed, the higher the number of grapes next to someone's bed, the higher the likelihood that they're not taking their laxative at the moment.
I like that.
Absolutely golden rule. If you see grapes next to the bed, you sort of say, you're not taking your laxatives, are you? And then he'll say, nah, I'm not taking them. I don't like them. And I just eat grapes, basically, because I like to do it the natural way, basically. And then you sort of say things like, well, yeah, but you are on, opioids as well, and they really slow your bowel and you gut down quite considerably. And then grapes probably won't cut it, and especially because last time round you went into hospital with bowel obstruction. So it is also important to take some of the medicines, and then you sort of explain some of the ways that these medicines work. But yeah, next time you go back, the grapes are back. And then there's some plums as well. And the plums are there just as an add-on to the grapes because they still don't want to take the medicines.
I had to go back and check the date on this one. You remember, was it episode 2 when you gave us a paper that was 12 years out of date, Jamie? And
turned up for Journal Club with a 12-year-old paper.
And I got to admit, I thought you'd done it again because it doesn't describe it as a new issue, and then it describes it as a new concern, and I don't think it is. I think it's one of those ones that has been around for a long time, isn't it? So it's interesting that even in a recent paper we're talking about it as an issue. Now, I remember when we brought in the medicines use review into the community pharmacy contract, and for me, this was what that was supposed to do. Now, MURs have never been that fashionable, but I've actually always really liked them and liked the idea of them, because this is what they were intended to address, I think, was how people take their medicines at home. And I think they got war into a pseudo-medication review, which, for me wasn't what they were supposed to be about. It was supposed to be about conversations with a patient about how they take their medicines. So papers like this maybe offer the opportunity to look at things like medicines use review and see, how can we do things differently there. I want to give a shout out as well to Martin Davis in Wales and Your Medicines, Your Health. That's a national campaign in Wales that is all about this, and they talk about spring cleaning your medicine and things like this. But that's where teams of people are going out into places like people's homes and care homes and stuff, taking the time where they socialise and where they are to talk about their medicines. There is some good work on this going on out there.
If I can come in here as well, I completely agree with that. I sort of in my clinics quite often, I think you can sort of tell from the outset where people sort of quite honestly say to you, I'm not a big tablet fan, I'm not a big medication fan, and you talk them through different things, and I suspect as pharmacists you talk them through certain things, how to take the medicines, but all the while, what's going in the back of their mind is probably sort of, I'll try this for a few days, and if it doesn't work, I'm going to ditch it. But I'm too polite to say anything right now. So I think that's just quite a natural human response. I think it's probably, some patients take the medicines and they take them as instructed, and others will just do a little bit of their own thing and tinker quite a bit. And I mean, I think if you come across as someone who's going to really give them a massive bollocking if they tell you that they've been tinkering a bit, they're not going to tell you in the first place. So I tend to have a very relaxed approach to this and said, have you been taking it every day, or are you just popping one every week or so with the MST? And then they'll say, I just take it on the odd day, and then they're quite honest about it. And then if you ask people why that is, there's all sorts of different reasons. I mean, being German, I've often found the Brits are probably more of a pill-popping nation than the Germans are, just generally. And that's not because of suppositories in Germany. It's more because I think there's a real skepticism sometimes of medication, and people see, culturally, when I grew up, it was seen as a defeat to have to take a tablet, and there must be something wrong with your body if you have to take tablets all of the time. Whereas when I came over here, it's like people couldn't get enough paracetamol and ibuprofen and all sorts in them, even for the mildest hangover. So I don't know, maybe there's a societal attitude to medicines where some people really like medicines, but there's always going to be the dark underbelly of people who are sort of skeptical but don't want to argue with you in the middle of the pharmacy or in the middle of the clinic room, basically.
Thanks, Mark. I'll just finish up with Gimo's response of, we've been here before, and it'll take you back to a Royal College of Physicians paper from June 2011. Time after time, we heard from witnesses and saw on our visits that the context of people's daily lives was more important in the effective use of medicines than merely prescribing the right medicine and explaining how to take it. We miss that so often, the context of people's daily lives, what's going on with them. The bit that the editorial doesn't go into, which I'm fascinated in, is about the systems that people have in place in their houses for dealing with medicines, and we'll explore that another time, I'm sure. But, people, when you enter the acute phase of having a medicine, it comes into the house and it goes somewhere. And then after a while, people have, given up, and then it gets tidied up and moved somewhere else. And so I think that sort of supply chain within the house is something that we should talk about again. And then on the lactulose, I've done domiciliary visits back in the day where people used to, it's like a collectible. It's like a vintage. Bottles and bottles of Gaviscon and lactulose lined up, gathering dust like a fine wine.
Well, that's true. I mean, but the lactulose, the whole way it works is on fermentation in your large bowel. So maybe the older it gets, the deeper the fermentation in your large bowel becomes, and the more gas is formed, and, the smell just become more mature.
Maybe lactulose should have a year.
Yeah, it certainly is a fascinating area, which I'm sure we'll revisit on many occasions. A big thank you to Mark for joining us on the Oral Apothecary and for sharing his stories, his desert island drug, his career anthem, and a book. I mean, after the career anthem, the book and the drug are just secondary, aren't they? So that's okay.
Coming up next time, we'll be joined by Jonathan Laird. Jonathan is a pharmacist and independent prescriber. His primary role at the moment is owner and publisher at Pharmacy and Practice in Scotland. He's also an experienced podcaster. So we're looking forward to catching up with Jonathan next time on the Oral Apothecary. Hope you can join us.
Over to Gimo now for our contact details and the final ingredient.
Yep, so you can email us at oralapothecarypod@gmail.com, and we're on Twitter at oralapothecary. And so just again, it's been great to see everyone getting in touch with us on Twitter. Lisa Riley tweeted that she binged episode 2 and 3, so we've become We've become Netflix-like.
It was only a matter of time. It was only a matter of time.
She's worried it's reigniting her pharmacy urges. So maybe we've brought someone back into the profession. So that's
and the lactulose tonight is not going to make that any better, is it?
It'd be great to see you back, Lisa. But the final ingredient is we've even got a dog listening. So Kathy Cook turned her Twitter account over to her dog Roy. And he tweeted his desert island drug this week. It was, I'm going to get this pronunciation wrong, enteroclid, spot on, anti-parasitic solution to stop him scratching on the island. So we've got a dog on the island with his desert island drug.
You have been listening to a 3 Apothecaries production.
The Oral Apothecary Podcast. Sound and production, Jimbo Slough. Music by Jamie Brewster. And artwork by David Baker. Thanks for listening to the Oral Apothecary Podcast. It's all about pills, thrills, and bellyaches.